going on, guys? Jim Surratt, Hammer Strength Conditioning coming at you today. Want to get back to talking about gear comparisons, gear reviews. So today, we're going to talk about the differences between the Titan laminated Super Boss briefs and the F8 HD briefs, okay? So we won't go so much into like the actual construction of the briefs. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we're going to talk more about the material differences, like the differences in the types of material used, and how each brief can be best used and for whom each brief might be best suited. Okay, so let's talk about the Titan briefs first. So these are inside out, but you can still get the idea. So the Titan briefs are laminated, first and foremost. So it means that the layers of polyester, because again, powerlifting gear is made of either polyester or canvas. So the layers of the polyester are laminated, glued, and heated together, and then they are stitched around the edges and reinforced with seams. Okay, so what that does, sorry, I'm fat, it is hot, and I'm out of shape. So if I have to keep breathing during this, please forgive me. So anyway, so the briefs are laminated, like I've said about 12 times now, which means they are one solid piece construction, which makes them, as you can see as I'm trying to turn them inside out, or right side out rather, they are much stiffer as compared to a non-laminated brief. Now what this does is it reduces the ability of the brief to be deformed, right? So I've talked about it before, how gear works on the concept of deformation and reformation or restoration, right? So as we sit back into briefs or as we pull down into a shirt, right, the gear stretches. Now, it doesn't stretch like elastic. Fuck. It doesn't stretch like elastic does, right? So it's not like a slingshot or like a knee wrap. But the gear does deform over a certain amount of distance across the warp and the weft, which is the vertical, I think the vertical and the horizontal pull of the fabric. Right, so as we sit back into the briefs, because we're talking about briefs right now, the gear deforms, so the seat stretches, okay? And then it reaches, when you reach depth or you reach the point where the gear will no longer deform under the load that you have, you stand back up and it provides rebound or pop out of the hole, off the floor, or off the chest, and that's how you get the carryover through your range of motion. Okay, so the Titan Super Boss briefs are again laminated, which makes them very stiff, and therefore they can be very supportive and very aggressive with their rebound. However, I have found through personal experiences, I've worn both the HD briefs and the Super Boss briefs to both squat and deadlift in, right? So I've used both of them for both of the two lifts. I have found that personally, I benefit more from a heavier duty, more pliable material like the HD brief when I squat as compared to a less pliable material, stiffer material like the Super Boss briefs. Why is that? I don't really know. It could be because the HD briefs are more easily manipulated. You can move them. You can move your body through space where you need to go with less resistance. So there's a trade-off, right? So the Super Boss briefs, again, these are standing up on their own, right? There's nothing inside of them. Okay, they just stand up on their own because they're so stiff. The HD briefs do not. Right, so two very different material types. So personally, I have found that I do better with the HD briefs to squat rather than the Boss briefs. Now, a lot of people can disagree with me and are going to disagree with me, and that's okay. But what I have found is that because the Super Boss briefs are so stiff, right, because they stand up on their own, because they're so rigid, right, the amount of carryover you get is very high, but the degree of difficulty in utilizing them to get into your groove while squatting or while lowering yourself through the eccentric portion of your lift is much more challenging. So, and also because they're so stiff, they're not very pliable. They don't fold up very well. So they're difficult to get a belt around. If you're squatting in just briefs, it's a little more challenging. If you have a suit on over top, it can be more challenging, especially if you're in a canvas suit. So I have found personally that the Super Boss briefs, and these are I think 2-ply. I know Titan makes custom orders for like 3 and 4-ply, but I believe these are 2-ply briefs. I could be wrong, but I think they're 2-ply. I have found that I do better with these for deadlifting than I do for squatting. Now, why is that? Again, because I think that these kick you out of your groove more aggressively than the HD briefs do when you squat. So when you squat in a pair of briefs, right, the weight on your back is pushing you into position, right? It's physically lowering you, right? So it acts as an external force. It acts as an external force to put you through your range of motion and requires you to be very precise with your groove, right? We all know what the groove means, right? It's the way in which you move relative to how the brief and the suit load under load, right? So with the squat, you get that external load, which can be useful for something stiff like a Superboss brief. But in deadlift, with the deadlift, you as the lifter have to be much more active in putting yourself in the correct posture and position to effectively utilize the gear. So I have found that for me, again, personally, based on my, intrinsic preferences, whether I'm aware of them or not, my subconscious preferences, I like the Superboss briefs better to deadlift in as compared to the HD briefs. Now, why is that? Well, because the Superboss briefs give you more pop off the floor as compared to the HD briefs. So polyester provides support based on layers, right? So whereas canvas provides support based on structure, if that makes sense. So these are, the F8 briefs are 4-ply. They make 2, 3, and 4-ply HD briefs. So I have the 4-ply HD briefs because I'm strong enough to handle them, right? But I also like them. But because they're 4-ply non-laminated, they're very bulky, right? Which in a squat isn't as big of a problem because you're being pushed into position, right? You have that external load on your back forcing you into position as you go through the eccentric portion of the lift. With the deadlift, you as the lifter have to be the active component, the actor, right? The main character, so to speak, in putting yourself in position. A thinner, but stiffer brief with deadlifting can be more effective than a heavier, bulkier, more pliable brief for deadlift because this has less material but provides the same level of pop, right? So when you deadlift, the way that I deadlift personally is I start with my hips very high. So I pull sumo, right? Now conventional is a little bit different story, but I'm a sumo puller in multiply, so we're gonna talk about that. So when I deadlift and multiply, I start with my hips very high. I have my stance, my wide sumo stance, and I actively pull myself down to the bar, okay? Now I have tried deadlifting in these 4-ply briefs, but they're too bulky. There's too much material, it gets in the way of my hips. I can't open up the way that I need to, that kind of stuff. So a thinner, but still stiffer material can be much more effective at providing the rebound necessary to build off or to create pop and momentum off the floor when it comes to deadlifting as compared to a heavier brief that is non-laminated. So I have found through personal experience that these are much more effective for deadlifting than for squatting for me. And these are much more effective for squatting than for deadlifting for me. Okay? So, let's talk about the construction of the suit because I kind of lost my train of thought. Or construction of the brief. So, both briefs are designed relatively similarly, right? No one's reinvented the wheel when it comes to briefs. So again, these are laminated, 2-ply. They have reinforced seams along the backside where they stitch the panels. So the way that Titan likes to build stuff is they do stuff in panels, right? So they have their back panel. I'm all over the place, man. Front panel, side panels, and their saddle or their crotch, right? So everything is a panel, right? So everything is layered on top of each other and then laminated beforehand, obviously, and then sewn together. So if I feel these right now, it feels like these are almost 2-ply in the back and 1-ply in the front because the back is much heavier than the front and is much less pliable than the front, right? So this is the back and this is the front. So obviously you can see that I can fold the front very easily, but the back requires more force to get into the same position, right? So the construction of the brief, it's got the side panels, the back panel, the front panel, good solid crotch, everybody likes a solid crotch, or a saddle. Okay, these are actually regular stance. So Titan makes, that's one of the good things about Titan is that they make both regular stance and wide stance briefs and suits. So they accommodate both a closer stance squatter or deadlifter and a wider stance squatter or deadlifter. So there was a time when I decided I was going to be a conventional multiply puller. That didn't work out very well because it's very difficult to pull conventional in multiply. Single ply, very different story. Multiply is very difficult. So I sold my wide stance briefs to somebody, and then I bought these regular stance. I actually found these work pretty well. Okay, and I think that's because the saddle is a little bit narrower and a little bit taller. So when you get out into your wide stance, you load it more aggressively, right? So I'm not saying that for everybody a regular stance brief would be good for sumo pulling, but for me personally, I have seen success with both the wide stance and the regular stance brief when it comes to deadlifting in my super bosses. I pulled 700 a couple weeks ago in just the brief, and then I pulled 765, 30-pound lifetime PR in the briefs and the double ply velocity sumo suit. Okay, so obviously very effective for deadlifting. Probably really good for squatting as well. I've squatted in not this pair of briefs, but in other Titan briefs, and I like it. It's just too stiff. It's so like everything about multiply sucks, right? Multiply is just uncomfortable, and there's no way around that, right? But you shouldn't be actively uncomfortable. Like shit shouldn't hurt, right? Like the material, it's gonna bite. Like I have marks from the deadlift from my briefs the other day. You're gonna get bruising, you're gonna get pinching, you're gonna get cuts and blisters and that kind of stuff. But when you get into a position where you have 1,000+ pounds on your back on a regular basis, the last thing you want to think about is how your briefs are biting you, okay? And what I have found, and this is not just me, is that the Titan briefs have a very narrow quad opening as compared to like the HD briefs. So if you look at the brief, you can see it's tapered, right? It tapers down like this. Okay, so the quad opening is much narrower, okay, or is much tighter than like the HD brief from F8, which creates more support because it creates more tension through the material and more resistance and binding of the material, but it's much more uncomfortable, okay? So let's talk about the HD briefs. Sorry, I'm all over the place. This is the second time I recorded this. The first time was much better. The second time, not so much, okay? Let's talk about the HD briefs. So very different construction, you can see, right? So narrower hips or narrower, that's really fucking hard. A much more narrow torso, and then the hips flare out wide as compared to the Super Boss briefs, which are kind of like a barrel of a gun, right? They come straight down, they taper down, and they're much more aggressive through the hips. So F8 does not make regular versus wide stance gear, right? All their gear is the same cut. It's just how many plies and then what type of material you get. So F8 makes the HD briefs, so heavy duty. They also make regular, like standard, like SD, standard duty type briefs. I really like the HD briefs. They're very supportive. So again, Poly provides support while you squat and deadlift and bench through layering of the material, right? So these are 4-ply, so there's 4 layers of material providing support. So because it's a heavier duty material, has a higher GSM, which is grams per square meter, which is how the weight of fabric is weighed, right? They're much more supportive. Okay, so heavier side paneling or heavier side stitching, much more thorough with their stitching, big, heavy sort of cap seams, I guess you could say, you know, like the hems, very, very heavy duty. The one thing I like about the HD briefs as compared to the Boss briefs is they have loops on both sides. So as you can see, the Titan loops or the Titan briefs only have loops on the backside. They charge you extra to put loops on the front. I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks for $1 worth of material and probably 10 minutes of time, right? I get it, but it's a pain in the ass. F8, much better. Loops on the front and back, standard, no extra cost. Okay? So again, like I was talking about earlier, I do very well with these squatting, but not so much with deadlifting because they are so bulky and the material binds up in a way that just gets in the way, right? So there's a difference between the material binding up how it should and excess material just getting in the way, right? Especially under a suit. So if you're squatting or deadlifting in just briefs, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have a suit on top of that, so if you have an extra 2 or 3 plies of material, whether polyester or canvas, on top of your 2 to 3 to 4 plies of material for your brief, you're looking anywhere between 4 and 6 to 7 layers of material. And if you're wearing canvas, that's a lot, right? So because the HD briefs are so bulky, they bind up really hard in the hips and they can bunch up, which makes them not so good for deadlifting because it's difficult to get down into your position because, again, like I said, when you squat, you have that external load pushing you into position. So you basically have additional assistance with deforming the gear, whereas in a deadlift, you have less assistance because the bar is static on the floor and you as the lifter have to put yourself into position, right? So the HD briefs, again, are very supportive, a lot of pop. I've squatted 1,000 pounds. It was high and sketchy as shit, but I've squatted 1,000 pounds in just the briefs and sleeves. Okay, I've squatted in competition 1,003. I've had probably 1,200 pounds on my back with these plus a metal or plus a metal canvas jack squat suit. So 1,000 pounds plus 200 and chain. So great briefs for squatting because they're comfortable. I can wear them for a long period of time. So if I have a long training session, or if I have multiple people training with me and we're rotating through lifts or through attempts, they're very comfortable. They don't cut off blood flow, so I don't lose circulation. Whereas with these, the Titan briefs, I can't wait to get these sumbitches off. Okay? So my recommendation, depending on, and it's all personal preference, right? And the thing about multiply and gear in general is that you have to spend money to find out what works for you. But when I first started in gear, no one was making these types of videos, so no one talked about the different types of suits and different types of briefs. Like at the time, there was Inzer, Metal, and Titan, right? F8 hadn't come around yet. Overkill hadn't come around yet, or was just starting to come around, but wasn't very well known. Definitely not where they are today. So when I first jumped into gear, I jumped straight into multiply. I had a pair of the orange, the whole orange setup. I looked like a fucking traffic cone. I had the metal jack briefs, the metal jack suit that I squatted and deadlifted in, and I had a metal jack shirt, okay? But no one talked about the different types of briefs, different types of materials, and how each one might be beneficial for somebody versus another, okay? So it's my hope that somebody watches this, even as disjointed and sort of convoluted as it might be right now, and say, hey, I learned a little bit, or I want to know more, what questions can I ask, okay? So the bottom line, in my opinion, okay, having worn both types of briefs for both squat and deadlift, the F8 HD briefs are the hands down winner when it comes to squatting, okay? Feel free to disagree, feel free to comment, blow me up, all that kind of stuff, I don't really care. Okay, they're far more comfortable, they're more pliable, they're easier to manipulate, and they're less painful to wear, okay? Maybe provide a little, so if these were equal, meaning if these were 2-ply and these were 2-ply, these will probably give you more pop because they are laminated, they are stiffer, and they are harder to deform. However, by virtue of the layering, meaning that there's 4 layers of material in the HD briefs, they provide more support than these do. Okay, so when it comes to squatting, the HD briefs are the hands down winner when it comes for me. And when it comes to deadlifting, Titan is the clear winner, right? I've used F8 briefs and F8 suits to deadlift in. I don't feel it gives enough rebound or enough pop off the floor to be really effective. So it's kind of interesting how one company like F8 can make one product that works really, really well for one thing, right? F8 is known for its band shirts. And now it's getting more into multiply. I have a 2-ply and a 3-ply Ace shirt from F8. They're good shirts. They're well constructed, just like everything F8 does. There's no issues with the construction of the shirt. They're just not as poppy as I would like them to be, right? The Titan material is very different than the F8 material. Okay, I don't know where they each get their material from, but the Titan material is much different than even the HD briefs or the HD material or the standard material. Okay? So again, if you're looking to squat big numbers, F8 HD briefs all day. If you can handle 4-ply, go 4-ply because why the fuck not, right? If you're looking to deadlift big numbers, Titan is the way to go. 2-ply, either regular or wide stance, get them, make sure they're laminated. You can grid stitch them if you want. So that's one thing we should talk about. So the Titan briefs do not come grid stitched. You have to either custom order them grid stitched, or you have to find a third party that will do it. Okay, the F8 briefs are grid stitched, right? So what does grid stitching do? So grid stitching, especially in a non-laminated brief or a non-laminated suit, binds the layers together, right? So the stitching goes through all the layers of the material, and it creates additional binding, additional tension through the material, so it's harder to deform, right? So for something like the F8 HD brief, I get a lot of support because and a lot more rebound because it is grid stitched. Now, I'd be very interested to see, not to the point where I want to spend $300 or $400 on a pair of briefs to find out, but if these weren't grid stitched, how much less support and rebound would I get, right? So like the Inzer Predators, okay? Kind of everybody's first like hardcore brief is the Inzer Predator, and then they graduate and evolve from there. Those you can get grid stitched, either again through Inzer, I think, or through a third party, but they don't come grid stitched. I really like grid stitching, especially in briefs. Not so much in a suit, because I think that there's obviously a point of diminishing returns where it comes to like, hey, there's too much resistance and I can't get down to depth. Or if I get to depth, I'm gonna kick forward, I'm gonna get pushed out from underneath the bar, right? I think the last pair of these that I had were wide stance grid stitched, okay? And they worked really well. I've gotten stronger since then, so it's kind of hard to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges or one to one, right? But it'd be interesting to see if I got these grid stitched, how much more pop I could get out of them. Because again, when you load the brief or the suit or the seat and the saddle of the brief, there's more resistance. It is less inclined to stretch the way it should, so it's harder to stretch it. So you as the lifter have to apply more force, but you get more rebound out of it, okay? So again, final thought, big squat numbers, HD brief, okay? 4-ply if you can handle it. Big deadlift number, Titan Super Boss laminated briefs, 100% down, okay? So as always, thanks for checking out the video. I hope it made a little bit of sense to everybody. I know it's kind of all over the place right now, but again, it's very hot, and I'm 246 pounds right now, and I'm fat and out of breath, and it's really hard to talk, okay? So please like, comment, subscribe, share all that stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me at HammerSNC. You can visit my website, www.hammersnc.com, or you can email me, hammersnc@gmail.com. And as always, don't waste the pain.